Welcome to Big Idea Hardly, where you can learn something new in just a few minutes. Today we study together Neil Gorsuch's book, Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law, in which we probe into the consequences of excessive legal regulation on ordinary lives. Neil Gorsuch is an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. His most recent book, A Republic, If You Can Keep It, was a New York Times bestseller and won the 2022 Burton Award for Book of the Year in Law. In Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law, Neil Gorsuch delves into the profound effects that excessive legal regulation can have on the lives of ordinary people. Through a series of compelling stories and detailed analyses, the book highlights the often overlooked human costs of an overburdened legal system. Let's explore this critical issue in depth. One of the most illustrative stories in this book is the case of John and Sandra Yates. John, a commercial fisherman, found himself facing charges under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act for allegedly destroying evidence by throwing undersized fish overboard. This act, primarily intended to combat corporate fraud, was stretched to apply to a fisherman's daily activities. Despite following the rules at the time, John was prosecuted based on a retroactive application of new regulations. The ordeal not only led to a potential 20-year prison sentence, but also cost John his job and home and brought immense stress to his family. This story underscores how the sheer volume and complexity of our laws had swallowed up ordinary people. Another powerful example from the book is the story of Caring Hearts, a Kansas home healthcare company. The federal government accused Caring Hearts of fraud for allegedly violating regulations. However, it turned out that the company had adhered to the rules in place at the time of their actions. The case dragged on for 6 years, consuming resources and causing significant distress to the company and its employees. This highlights a critical point. The government produces such a large number of rules at such a furious pace and with such complexity that even agency officials responsible for them had become confused. The experiences of the Butte, Montana residents with the Superfund cleanup efforts provide another poignant illustration of the impact of excessive legal regulation. Residents like Sean Houlihan and the Cooney family faced ongoing health risks from arsenic-laden soil, despite extensive and costly cleanup efforts by the government. The legal battle that ensued when residents sought a more thorough cleanup under state law shows how federal regulations can sometimes hinder rather than help local efforts. As Gorsuch notes, a federal law designed to promote the cleanup of contaminated lands thus became a tool to thwart a local effort to do just that. Each of these stories reveals a common theme. The law's complexity and overreach often result in unintended and detrimental consequences for ordinary citizens. The stories also illustrate how legal regulations, while well-intentioned, can become disconnected from the realities of everyday life and the needs of those they are meant to serve. In Overruled, Gorsuch emphasizes the importance of laws that are clear, knowable, and stable. He argues that the proliferation of complex regulations creates an environment where only the affluent or well-connected can navigate the legal system effectively. This leaves ordinary people vulnerable to legal traps and bureaucratic overreach. The rule of law does not mean rule by law. Adolf Hitler blanketed Germany with laws, many secret and unknowable except to those in the Führer's favor. The rule of law demands more than that. It requires laws that are publicly declared, knowable to ordinary people, and stable. One of the most striking aspects of this book is how it brings to light the personal stories behind legal cases. Gorsuch recounts the case of a man who was denied Social Security benefits because he couldn't access the evidence the officials relied on to reject his application. In another instance, a veteran was denied disability benefits due to a technicality, despite Congress having instructed the agency to accept applications like his as timely. These stories illustrate the disconnect between legal regulations and the practical realities faced by individuals. The book also discusses the broader societal impacts of excessive legal regulation. Gorsuch reflects on the speech by Václav Havel, where he describes a society where the proliferation of laws leads to a disconnect between the government and the lived experiences of ordinary people. This resonates with the experiences of the residents of Butte, Montana, who, despite extensive legal and bureaucratic efforts, continued to face health risks and environmental hazards. Gorsuch's critique extends to the administrative state, highlighting how unelected officials often wield significant power through the creation of complex regulations. This can undermine democratic principles and erode public trust in government institutions. No one group, party, or impulse is to blame for the recent changes in our nation's approach to law. These days, we are a people who trust one another less and less. This lack of trust leads to an over-reliance on legal solutions to social and economic problems, further entrenching the cycle of over-regulation. The stories and analyses in Overruled make a compelling case for the need to simplify and streamline our legal system. Gorsuch argues for a return to a more balanced approach to regulation, one that respects the principles of clarity, knowability, and stability in law. He calls for laws that are rooted in common sense and aligned with the practical realities of people's lives. As the editor of Hardly, we must ponder, through understanding these issues, what can we do differently in the future? Perhaps we should advocate for a legal system that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and responsiveness to the needs of ordinary citizens. By doing so, we can ensure that the law serves its true purpose, to protect and empower all members of society, rather than burden and entangle them in an impenetrable web of regulations. In Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law, Neil Gorsuch compellingly illustrates the significant consequences of excessive legal regulation on the lives of ordinary individuals. Through a series of vivid stories, the book exposes how the proliferation of complex and often contradictory laws can entrap and devastate those they are meant to protect. Consider the story of the Amish community in Pennsylvania, who faced legal challenges over their traditional farming methods. Federal regulations required the community to install modern septic systems, which conflicted with their religious beliefs and simple way of life. The Amish were forced into a prolonged legal battle to preserve their traditions and avoid the exorbitant costs of compliance. This case exemplifies the broader theme of how overregulation can intrude upon personal freedoms and disrupt cultural practices, highlighting the human cost of an overburdened legal system. The book's central argument is clear. Excessive and overly complex laws can lead to unjust outcomes and erode public trust in the legal system. Gorsuch calls for a more balanced approach to regulation, emphasizing the need for laws that are clear, knowable, and respectful of individual liberties. As the editor of Hardly, we must ask ourselves, through understanding these issues, what can we do differently in the future? Perhaps we should strive to advocate for a legal framework that is transparent, equitable, and adaptable to the diverse needs of society. By doing so, we can create a more just and harmonious society where the law truly serves the people.